In the long tapestry of Chinese history, there has perhaps never been a moment that mirrors the First Empire period of 2,200 years ago more closely than today. A brand new nation and a novel state system have risen from the ruins of endless warfare. After decades of accumulation, it has amassed staggering wealth. Rapid technological leaps have revolutionized productivity, and after a period of low-profile endurance, it has built a formidable military force with an unmistakable intent for multi-directional expansion. Comparing contemporary China with the early Han Empire reveals a series of startling parallels. The backgrounds, temperaments, and paths to power of their founders are virtually identical. The post-founding power purges and political upheavals follow the same script. The economic policy adjustments following the catastrophic destruction of social production are mirrors of each other. From strategic compromises and economic liftoff after periods of turmoil, to the total centralization, state intervention, and assertive posturing during the height of national power, the script of history seems to be replaying with haunting precision. Is this a prophecy or a mere coincidence? What are the shocking overlaps between the rise of the Han Empire and the rise of China today?
Hello everyone, welcome back to China Puzzle. Due to a busy schedule, I haven't appeared on camera for quite some time. However, because this topic is of such immense significance, I decided to present this to you in person. Please note that these are my personal reflections and conclusions, and do not represent the views of any institution or official entity. It must be noted that it has been over 200 years since Chinese civilization last occupied a central position in the global geopolitical landscape. Therefore, a powerful and prosperous China is not only a strange and baffling phenomenon to the rest of the world, it is not even something that Chinese people themselves are currently accustomed to. In recent years, on the Chinese internet, young people and certain scholars have been particularly keen on drawing comparisons between today's China and the early Han Empire. Naturally, such discourse is frequently censored. Yet it continues to emerge incessantly. Today, we will explore this fascinating topic through the lenses of national founding, early turmoil, economic development, centralization, and strategic grand design.
In the 3rd century BC and the mid-20th century, China experienced a total collapse of the old order, followed by an extremely violent political restructuring. In 221 BC, Qin Shi Huang swept away the 6 rival states with overwhelming force, establishing the first centralized, unified empire in Chinese history. What followed was the brutal Chu-Han contention, a 4-year bloody civil war between Xiang Yu and Liu Bang for control of the world. This historical scene found a perfect echo in modern China. The Xinhai Revolution of 1911 overthrew the Qing dynasty, marking the end of 2 millennia of imperial rule. Yet, what followed was not democracy and peace, but nearly 40 years of warlord strife, the war of resistance against Japanese aggression, and the Chinese Civil War. During this era, which official Chinese historiography calls the Century of Humiliation, imperialist expansion by Western powers and the Japanese invasion brought China to an unprecedented crisis of national survival. Much like the chaos at the end of the Qin dynasty, the total collapse of the old order and endless warfare created an intense societal longing for a powerful, centralized government. In 1949, the Communist Party of China defeated the Kuomintang and established the People's Republic of China, achieving the reunification of a fractured mainland. In the internet culture of mainland China, people love to compare Mao Zedong with Liu Bang. Indeed, the two share remarkably similar political genes. Liu Bang was the first founding emperor in Chinese history to rise from the commoner class. His rival, Xiang Yu, was a descendant of the Chu nobility, a figure of medieval romanticism who championed brute force and old feudal codes of honor. In contrast, Liu Bang, a commoner from a small county in Chu, was cunning, pragmatic, and deeply acquainted with the hardships of the grassroots. He knew how to listen to counsel and how to gather elites from all social strata. Liu Bang's victory was not merely a military one. It was a victory of plebeian pragmatism over aristocratic elitism. Similarly, Mao Zedong hailed from a peasant family in Hunan, the heartland of the ancient Chu state. He discarded the early Soviet model of the CCP, which relied on urban worker uprisings, and instead headed into the countryside. There he discovered and mobilized the armed strength of China's vast peasantry, ultimately seizing national power through the strategy of encircling the cities from the countryside. His opponent, KMT leader Chiang Kai-shek, possessed in some ways a better education and pedigree, representing the interests of China's middle and upper classes at the time. Beyond the fundamental factors of origin and class, Liu Bang and Mao Zedong share startling similarities in temperament, upbringing, and even philosophical outlook. Neither was illiterate, yet both harbored a deep disdain for intellectuals. Liu Bang dismissed them as pedantic scholars and famously received them while washing his feet. Mao Zedong displayed a profound animosity toward university professors in the humanities, labeling them the stinking old ninth. On the other hand, both possessed exceptional literary talent. Liu Bang's Song of the Great Wind and Song of the Swan have been recited for 2,000 years, and Mao Zedong's proficiency in classical poetry is widely recognized by the literary community. Both were extremely vulnerable and faced numerous setbacks in the early stages of their struggles. Both suffered repeated defeats initially, but persevered through sheer willpower and a military philosophy centered on guerrilla and mobile warfare. Both eventually undertook epic expeditions, Liu Bang's Western Campaign and Mao's Long March, to finally break the deadlock. Despite having no formal military training, both were able to master and apply the core laws of warfare, commanding many miraculous battles that defied conventional logic. Contemporary historians evaluating Liu Bang believe his core philosophy was absolute flexibility, having no taboos and starting everything from practical needs, never bound by any rigid framework. This is why his aristocratic opponent, who possessed far more resources, was left helpless. This trait was perfectly reproduced in Mao Zedong. He even gave this mindset a very materialistic name: seeking truth from facts. It was this radical pragmatism that allowed both Liu Bang and Mao Zedong to defeat seemingly invincible opponents and gain control of China within a span of roughly 4 years.
There is an intriguing question here. How did Mao Zedong view Liu Bang? In fact, as the founder of New China, Mao held Liu Bang in very high regard. He stated directly, Liu Bang was the most formidable emperor of the feudal era. Regarding Liu Bang's rival, Xiang Yu, Mao held a certain contempt, much like the scorn he felt for his own rival, Chiang Kai-shek. Mao even wrote a famous line of poetry to satirize Xiang Yu: "Pursue the tottering foe with power to spare. Do not seek a hollow name like the overlord king." Even more interestingly, before the decisive battle with Mao Zedong in Suzhou, which was Pengcheng, the ancient capital of Xiang Yu County leader Chiang Kai-shek remarked with great anxiety, "I do not understand why everyone is talking about Xiang Yu being trapped at Pengcheng," as if this ancient battlefield of the Central Plains is destined to be an ill omen for us.
Following the establishment of the Han Empire and New China, both founders, Liu Bang and Mao Zedong, faced a thorny issue of internal power distribution. At the dawn of the Han Dynasty, to appease the vassal kings of different surnames who had helped him conquer the world, Liu Bang was forced to implement the dual system of commanderies and principalities, granting them vast autonomous territories. However, Fueled by a deep-seated fear and suspicion that these kings would use their armies to challenge the throne, Liu Bang spent his remaining years conducting a series of cold-blooded political purges. He systematically liquidated these founding heroes to ensure the absolute security of the Liu imperial family. Modern China experienced a similar reconsolidation of power and high-level ideological struggles in its early years. In the process of stabilizing the regime and facing the immense pressure of national reconstruction, Mao Zedong launched a continuous series of political campaigns, including the anti-rightist movement, the Great Leap Forward, and ultimately the Cultural Revolution. During these upheavals, many founding generals and ministers who had fought side by side with him were ruthlessly purged or toppled due to policy disagreements or perceived political threats. Across 2 millennia, the plebeian leaders' desperate thirst for absolute power security led to the same tragic fate for the founding meritocrats. The parallels are so numerous that young people on the Chinese internet today often use the names of early Han officials as code names to bypass censorship when discussing these modern founding fathers. Let us examine 2 famous examples. The first is the parallel between Han Xin and Lin Biao. In the early Han, Han Xin was hailed as the god of war, the greatest military commander in Liu Bang's camp. He opened the northern front, conquered the states of Wei, Zhao, Yan, and Xi, and ultimately led the Grand Army at the Battle of Gaixia to annihilate Xiang Yu. Without Han Xin, Liu Bang would never have won the world. Yet Han Xin's brilliant military genius and his immense prestige among the troops became his death warrant. After the empire was established, Liu Bang grew increasingly suspicious, repeatedly stripping him of command. Ultimately, Han Xin was framed for treason and lured into the Changle Palace, where he was executed by Empress Lu and Xiao He, and his entire clan was exterminated. Modern China also had a founding marshal renowned for his military genius, Lin Biao. During the Chinese Civil War, Lin Biao's 4th Field Army fought all the way from the frozen northeast to tropical Hainan Island, destroying the core strength of the Kuomintang. He was the primary architect of the Republic's military victory. After 1949, Lin Biao was eventually designated as Mao Zedong's successor. But like Han Xin, his vast influence within the military eventually triggered the alarm of the supreme leader. In an extremely complex political struggle, Lin Biao was ultimately characterized as a conspirator plotting to seize power. He died in a plane crash in Undakan, Mongolia, while attempting to flee in 1971. 2 generations of military geniuses, after helping a plebeian leader secure the world, both met tragic ends due to the suspicion of power and their own political missteps. The second is the parallel between Xiao He and Zhou Enlai. If Han Xin and Lin Biao were the sword at the front, then Xiao He and Zhou Enlai were the shield at the rear. Xiao He was Liu Bang's great steward. During the years of the Chuhan contention, he held the Guanzhong base, providing a continuous flow of soldiers and grain to the front lines. Liu Bang named him the foremost hero of the founding. Xiao He understood that serving a monarch is like living with a tiger. To dispel Liu Bang's suspicions, he went as far as to tarnish his own reputation by forcibly buying up commoners' land to show he had no grand political ambitions. When Empress Lu moved to execute Han Xin, Xiao He, who had been Han Xin's mentor, personally lured him into the palace. Xiao He's survival strategy was based on extreme caution and absolute political obedience. This trait of endurance and prioritizing the greater good found a perfect reincarnation in Zhou Enlai, the first premier of modern China. Zhou was the super steward of the Republic. Throughout the violent political storms of the founding decades, he was the only high-level leader who remained standing until the end. Facing the radical movements launched by the supreme leader, from the Great Leap Forward to the Cultural Revolution, Zhou Enlai walked a political tightrope. On one hand, he had to demonstrate absolute loyalty, sometimes making painful political compromises. On the other hand, he worked within his limited power to prop up the state's administrative and economic machinery, which was on the brink of collapse, protecting a number of valuable officials and intellectuals. Xiao He and Zhou Enlai, through their extraordinary endurance and pragmatism, kept the new regime running, but they paid a heavy psychological and moral price for it.
I will add an interesting detail here. Many of Liu Bang's purges of powerful officials were carried out through his wife, Empress Lu. Similarly, Mao Zedong's wife, Jiang Qing, played a crucial role in political struggles. She even modeled herself after Empress Lu, aspiring to be the Red Empress of New China. However, after Empress Lu's death, the founding meritocrats launched a coup and wiped out the Lu clan. 2,200 years later, history repeated itself. Chinese generals launched a coup and arrested the political clique led by Mao's wife, Jiang Qing, throwing them all into prison. In fact, if you look closely, the status and historical contributions of the generals who led the coup were almost identical to those in the Han Dynasty.
After the coup, the Communist Party, like the Han Empire, faced the challenge of reshaping its leadership. The Han meritocrats bypassed the lineage of the King of Qi, who had contributed greatly to the coup, and instead chose the modest Liu Heng, Emperor Wen. Similarly, Chinese generals bypassed the successor designated by Mao, who had also assisted in the coup, and chose the unassuming Deng Xiaoping, who had been purged and rehabilitated 3 times. Change and reform never happen overnight. After becoming the new emperor, Liu Heng performed countless meticulous and repetitive political tasks before he finally gained full control of the regime. Deng Xiaoping did the same. The ideological struggles within the party were no less intense than ancient palace intrigues. Ultimately, the battle-hardened Deng Xiaoping emerged victorious. Remarkably, much like Liu Heng, he achieved this primarily through bloodless political maneuvering. Once political stability was finally achieved, the rulers could finally turn their energy toward constructive fields. Following the violent upheavals and radical policies of the founding era, the state machinery and the national economy were exhausted, bordering on collapse. To save the regime, the ruling group was forced into a major strategic contraction in both politics and economics. In the Han Dynasty, this was known as the rule of Wen and Jing. In modern China, it was the reform and opening up, initiated by Deng Xiaoping. After the death of Liu Bang and the end of Empress Lu's brief regency, Emperor Wen established Huanglao Taoism as the state's dominant ideology. Huanglao thought advocated for governance through non-action and following the natural order, opposing strong government intervention in the economy and society. Under this guiding philosophy, Emperors Wen and Jing implemented extremely relaxed economic policies. They drastically reduced agricultural taxes, lightened forced labor, abolished many draconian laws inherited from the Qin, and loosened restrictions on cross-regional trade. This strategic withdrawal of the state immensely stimulated the productivity of the people. Sima Qian described in the Records of the Grand Historian that by the beginning of Emperor Wu's reign, the nation's wealth had reached a staggering level. Starting in 1978, modern China welcomed its own rule of Wen and Jing. After experiencing a great famine that caused tens of millions of unnatural deaths and the decade-long catastrophe of the Cultural Revolution, the Chinese economy was on the brink of collapse. As the chief architect, Deng Xiaoping officially launched the Reform and Opening Up policy, effectively overturning the planned economic system that had been in place for nearly 30 years. He abolished people's communes in the countryside, returning land management rights to farmers. In the cities, he gradually lifted price controls and allowed the development of the private sector. And he established special economic zones, such as Shenzhen and Pudong, to bring in massive foreign direct investment and integrate China into the global free trade system. Just like the rest and recuperation of the early Han, the modest retreat of state power created the most stunning economic miracle in modern history. From 1980 to 2015, China's average annual GDP growth exceeded 9%. Hundreds of millions were lifted out of absolute poverty, and China rapidly rose to become the world's second-largest economy and the world's factory. The 34-year period from 1978 to 2012, when Xi Jinping took office, was almost a carbon copy of the 37-year rule of Wen and Jing in the early Han. Even the political succession and structural completion were identical. Emperor Wen's son, Emperor Jing, faithfully continued and deepened his father's policies. Similarly, Deng Xiaoping's successors, Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, continued to deepen the reform and opening up policies. Among young Chinese netizens in recent years, the reputation of these two leaders has been rising. They even use the respectful term "that old gentleman" to refer to Jiang Zemin, believing his contribution was no less than that of Emperor Jing.
Another supplement, in the rule of Wen and Jing, the only major disruption was the rebellion of the Seven States, where regional powers opposed the central government. It was triggered by Emperor Jing following the strategist Cao Cao's plan to reduce the vassal states, leading to a joint regional revolt. However, under the command of the genius general Zhou Yafu, the central government crushed the rebellion in just 3 months, firmly establishing the strong trunk, weak branches political system. This process was identical to China in the 1990s, where dissatisfaction with reform and contradictions between the central and local governments were swiftly resolved by the brilliant economist and politician Zhu Rongji. Through the tax-sharing reform, he established the central government's total control over regional finances. The price was that, like Keichoukuo, who was executed by Emperor Jing to appease the rebels, he was one of the few Chinese premiers who failed to secure a second term. He bet his political career to fulfill the oath he took upon taking office. Regardless of whether there is a minefield or a bottomless abyss ahead, I will forge ahead, never looking back, and I will give my all until my heart stops beating.
In the Han Dynasty, the laissez-faire economic policies of the Wen-Jing era led to 2 severe consequences. First was the extreme expansion of power held by local feudal kings. The kings enfeoffed at the beginning of the Han Dynasty possessed administrative authority, the right to collect taxes, and even the right to mint their own currency within their domains. For example, Liu Bang, the king of Wu, became as wealthy as the state itself by exploiting the copper mines in his territory to mint coins and boiling seawater to produce salt. His financial power even surpassed that of the central government. Second, due to the lack of effective wealth redistribution mechanisms, land annexation became increasingly severe. Wealthy merchants and local magnates colluded to seize peasants' land on a massive scale, leading to a widening gap between the rich and the poor and causing large numbers of independent farmers to go bankrupt and become displaced. After 4 decades of its own economic whirlwind, modern China faces strikingly similar challenges. Long-term economic liberalization and decentralization of power have led to the entrenchment of interest groups and a widening wealth gap. The excessive financialization of the real estate market has created a massive asset bubble akin to the land annexation of ancient times, placing heavy housing pressure on ordinary people and reducing social mobility. Meanwhile, local governments have accumulated staggering hidden debts through vast local financing platforms, forming a pattern of local interests that are too big to fail, both financially and administratively. Even more seriously, the fusion of power and capital has led to severe corruption within the bureaucratic system. This internal tension, coupled with the escalating strategic containment of China's rise by the outside world, especially the United States, marked the end of a cycle. The historical pendulum had to swing back from loosening to tightening, paving the way for the emergence of a political strongman and a comprehensive national course correction. When history entered the year 141 BC, the 14-year-old Emperor Wu of Han Liu ascended to the pinnacle of imperial power. Faced with the legacy of powerful local kings and rampant local magnates from the Jing era, Emperor Wu was no longer content with passive maintenance. Instead, he initiated one of the most famous processes of power centralization in Chinese history. Similarly, after 2012, modern China also began a top-down political reconstruction. Emperor Wu adopted the brilliant strategy of his minister in 127 BC, promulgated the famous Order of Extended Grace. This decree stipulated that a feudal king must not only pass his fiefdom to his eldest son, but also had to divide parts of his territory among all his other sons, who would then be enfeoffed as marquises by the central government. As the descendants of the kings multiplied, the once vast kingdoms were automatically fragmented into countless tiny, broken marquisates within a few generations, no longer capable of posing a military or economic threat to the central authority. At the same time, to strengthen control over local bureaucrats and powerful landlords across the country, Emperor Wu divided the nation into 13 supervisory regions, appointing an inspector for each. The rank of an inspector was extremely low, but as the emperor's personal representative touring the regions, his power was immense. He could directly impeach high-ranking commandery governors and local kings. This supervisory system, where the low-ranking oversaw the high-ranking and were directly accountable to the supreme central authority, greatly deterred local corrupt officials and ensured the penetrative power of central policies. In modern China, the Communist Party of China has established and regularized the Central Inspection Team system. This system is strikingly consistent with the Han Dynasty's inspector system in its function and operational logic. The inspection teams are likened to the party's political health check and searchlight, dispatched directly by the central authorities to provinces, cities, central ministries, and large state-owned enterprises. The teams possess transcendent investigative powers, are not subordinate to local party or government organs, and their primary task is to inspect the political discipline and political rules of local cadres, ensuring absolute obedience to the core leadership of the party central committee. Through this airtight supervisory network, modern China has not only purged high-level corrupt elements within systems like the military and the judiciary, but has also, in substance, completed the retaming of the bureaucracy and a high degree of power centralization, clearing internal obstacles for subsequent major domestic and foreign strategies.
Controversy over the political struggles of China's leaders has never ceased. Just as the iron-fisted methods of Emperor Wu have always been a subject of debate throughout history. Some believe that the logic behind these so-called anti-corruption campaigns is nothing more than political struggle and a contest for control. This is, in fact, absolutely correct. There is no such thing as anti-corruption for the sake of anti-corruption. This has been true from ancient times to the present. The struggle for control is the only unchanging reason in politics. The only question we want to ask is, after gaining control, what is the next step?
Once political power was centralized, the state had to reclaim control over the lifelines of the economy. Emperor Wu completely abandoned the laissez-faire economics of the Jing era. Under the leadership of the brilliant and business-minded finance minister, Zhang Hongyang, the Han Empire launched a series of radical state capitalist policies. The most profitable industries, the production of salt, the smelting of iron, the brewing of liquor, and the minting of currency, were all brought under the monopoly of the central government. At the same time, the government established the Junshu, equitable transport, and Pingjun, price stabilization systems, where state agencies directly intervened in the cross-regional transport and trade of goods, buying in when prices were low and selling when prices were high in order to combat merchant speculation and stabilize prices. To further strike at wealthy merchants and fill the state coffers, Emperor Wu implemented the Suan Min, asset calculation, and Gao Min, asset reporting policies, imposing extremely high property taxes on merchants and encouraging people to report merchants who concealed their assets. Whistleblowers could receive half of the confiscated property. These policies greatly enriched the Han treasury in the short term and supported the military miracle of the Han army sweeping across the northern deserts. However, they also led to a decline in the quality and an increase in the price of ironware and greatly increased the burden on the common people. Such measures, of course, met with enormous opposition. Confucian scholars, from a standpoint of morality and free market economics, strongly demanded the abolition of the salt and iron monopolies. They argued that the government's duty was to edify the people with virtue, not to chase profits. They criticized the state monopolies and the price stabilization systems as competing with the people for profit, leading to officials abusing their power to hoard goods, colluding with merchants, corrupting the simple social customs, and inducing people to abandon agriculture in pursuit of commercial profiteering. The scholars warned that relying on such exploitative legalist-style extraction to maintain hegemony was like pouring more water into a flood, and would ultimately lead to a collapse like that of the Qin dynasty. Zhang Hongyang's defense was filled with the cold realism of national security. He retorted to the scholars, "Without the huge revenues from the salt and iron monopolies, how could the defensive fortifications on the northern border be maintained? How could the soldiers fighting the Xiongnu on the front lines be supplied?" He argued that the profits from mountains and seas should belong to the state, and that the price stabilization system was designed to balance regional supplies and prevent great merchants from controlling prices and exploiting the people. He ridiculed the scholars for knowing only how to dead recite ancient classics while being utterly ignorant of the real-world survival and operation of a state. This debate, which took place over 2,000 years ago, perfectly constitutes the underlying historical logic of the contemporary Chinese debate over the state advances, the private sector retreats versus market-oriented reforms. In modern China, the economy has never been viewed as a system that operates independently of the state's political will. Despite decades of market-oriented reforms, the Chinese government has always insisted on absolute control over the lifelines of the national economy. The state must control core economic resources to ensure it can mobilize its strength at any time to deal with Western technological blockades like the chip war and external security threats. In recent years, the Chinese government's strict anti-monopoly regulation of internet platform giants Its devastating crackdown on the private tutoring industry and its deleveraging operations on the highly leveraged real estate sector have shocked Western believers in the free market. However, when viewed through the lens of the discourses on salt and iron, all of this seems perfectly logical. When modern internet giants and capital magnates attempt to use data monopolies and financial leverage to hold national financial security hostage and excessively exploit the underlying populace, China's top leadership acts decisively, putting forward the political programs of preventing the disorderly expansion of capital and common prosperity. This is a resolute counterattack by the 2,000-year-old state will against the overreach of wealthy merchants and great magnates. In the political DNA of China's rulers, capital can only be a tool for achieving national rejuvenation. Capitalists must never be allowed to evolve into independent oligarchs capable of swaying national politics.
However, it must be pointed out that Emperor Wu did indeed squander a large amount of the wealth accumulated during the Jing era. His extravagant lifestyle, his unrealistic ambitions, and his grandiosity quickly emptied the state's capital. He waged campaigns in all directions for results that were not economically worthwhile, sometimes merely for the sake of great power prestige, resulting in the grim outcome of the empire's population being halved and the state treasury being exhausted. And what about China today? Although China has not yet started a war, there are clearly many projects that waste national resources. And perhaps it is just a coincidence, but for a country with a population of 1.3 billion, a number of newborn babies in 2025 is projected to be less than 8 million.
When internal power is centralized and the state machinery has completed sufficient mobilization and wealth accumulation, the expansion of external strategy becomes a historical inevitability. It is just that sometimes this expansion takes the form of war. Other times it is conducted in the name of commerce and trade. Emperor Wu first chose war. In 133 BC, the Han court orchestrated the famous Conspiracy of Mai, attempting to use a merchant as an inside agent to feign the surrender of a city, luring the Xiongnu Chanyu and his 300,000-strong army into an ambush circle for annihilation. Although the ambush failed because the Chanyu detected something unusual en route, this event marked the complete rupture of the false peace between Han and Xiongnu, with the Han Dynasty shifting entirely to a strategic offensive. In the decades that followed, Emperor Wu promoted the military genius Wei Qing, who was born a servant, and the young general Huo Qubing. He abandoned traditional infantry and chariot tactics and established massive long-range cavalry forces. The Han army repeatedly penetrated deep into the Great Desert, achieving decisive victories in campaigns such as the Battle of Mobei, driving the main Xiongnu forces out of the southern desert and greatly expanding the Han Dynasty's territory in the north. In this grand strategic game, in order to find allies to pincer the Xiongnu, Emperor Wu dispatched an envoy to the western regions, modern-day Xinjiang and Central Asia, in 138 BC. Although this failed to forge a direct military alliance, the envoy brought back tales of Parthia, India, and even the far more distant Rome. The envoy's exploration and the Han army's western campaigns unintentionally cleared the obstacles in Central Asia, officially opening the Silk Road that transported Chinese silk and tea to the west. The Han Dynasty's hegemony extended into the heart of Central Asia. In other directions, Emperor Wu's grand armies conquered the southwestern Yi and the Nanyue Kingdom to the south, incorporating modern-day Guangdong, Guangxi, Yunnan, and even northern Vietnam into Chinese territory. In the east, the Han Empire eliminated the secessionist state of Weimar Joseon, taking control of the northern Korean peninsula. In the southeast, the Han army further occupied territories in modern-day Zhejiang and Fujian, relocating the entire eastern Yue population to the Jianghuai region. It can be said that Emperor Wu, almost single-handedly during his reign, laid down the traditional contours of China's territory. Therefore, despite much controversy, almost every Chinese person refers to him as Han Wu the Great. Just as Emperor Wu ended the peace-through-marriage policy, modern China's diplomatic strategy, following its surpassing of Japan to become the world's second-largest economy after the 2000s, unhesitatingly bid farewell to the Deng Xiaoping era of hiding one's strength and biding one's time. Facing the United States' pivot to Asia and geopolitical containment, China began to display the confidence and assertiveness of a great power diplomacy. Whether it was establishing an air defense identification zone in the East China Sea, carrying out large-scale land reclamation and militarization on disputed islands and reefs in the South China Sea, or adopting a tough counterattack posture in the international public opinion arena labeled wolf warrior diplomacy by Western media, modern China's uncompromising stance on its core interests is a natural spillover of its national confidence following the rejuvenation of its power. As the then Chinese Foreign Minister Yang Jiechi bluntly stated at an ASEAN meeting, "China is a big country and you are small countries, and that is just a fact." In terms of grand economic and geopolitical strategy, China proposed the monumental Belt and Road Initiative. In official political propaganda, this initiative is unabashedly and directly linked to the historic achievement of Emperor Wu opening the Silk Road. Modern China attempts to digest its domestic overcapacity, secure energy import channels, and ultimately reshape the economic and geographical landscape of the Eurasian continent by providing huge infrastructure financing, building high-speed railways, ports, and energy pipelines for countries along the route, spanning Central Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and even Europe. In the eyes of Western strategists, this is by no means just an economic plan, but a century-defining strategy for China to use its vast state capitalist machine to break through the American maritime containment network on land. Just as Emperor Wu established a tributary system in the western regions through military force and trade, modern China is building a global South network with the Chinese economy at its core through infrastructure connectivity, re-establishing its civilizational status as the center of the world.
Up to this point, what we have discussed is all content that has already occurred in Chinese history, whether it happened 2000 years ago or just yesterday. But we cannot make simple predictions about the future based on history. For a civilization with several thousand years of history like China, it is not surprising for things that happened yesterday to happen again in the future. But this does not mean they will definitely happen, nor can it directly define the manner in which they will happen.